Switching over now. Hey, everybody.
Hey, everybody. Hello and welcome to AV Geeks at the Hunt Library. Still not at the Hunt Library. I'm Jason Evans-Groth, Digital Media Librarian for the Learning Spaces and Services Department at NC State University Libraries. This is our 12th semester of this series that partners NC State folks with Raleigh's AV Geeks to discuss vintage educational and classroom films.
Switching over now. Hey,
everybody. As always,
hold on,
the founder of AV Geeks is an NC State alum. He has been for the last few decades, collecting film made throughout the last century, mostly 16mm educational, training, and other sorts of how-to movies. Does an incredible job sharing them with the world, and currently houses over 36,000 such films at the AV Geeks archive here in Raleigh, and shares them as stock footage for films and exhibits, research material, and during public events like this one. So tonight's theme is Imagination of a Black Child, and we're very excited to welcome our guest, Professor Darrell Stover. Professor Stover is a cultural historian, science communicator, and performance poet. His career life has always been an intersection of science and art sifted through history, with an emphasis on community and individual empowerment through the same. He's on the faculty at NC State University, where he teaches Black popular culture from the blues to Afrofuturism and introduction to science, technology, and society. He studied microbiology and American Studies at the University of Maryland at College Park and acquired his Master of Arts degree in science writing from Johns Hopkins. His more recent public programs have been the performance lecture, The Natural History of Afrofuturia, and the curation of a series on the cultural significance of the Black Panther film, featuring a panel discussion on the science and technology represented on screen. And he presented Dream Steam, Afrofuturist Dances with the Sciences at the Afrofuturism and Indigenous Futurities Conference held at UNC Chapel Hill. He's also a member of the 2019 to 2020 Southeast cohort of Science Impactors. We're so pleased to have Professor Stover with us today. Thank you for being here.
I am glad to be here, Jason and Skip.
Thank you. All right, so before we get going, just a quick reminder, over 200 AV Geeks compilations are available for checkout from the libraries. You can also visit avgeeks.com or search AV Geeks on YouTube or at archive.org to find more. But now, let me hand things over to Professor Stover and Skip to kick us off.
Thank you, Jason. All right, so I'm excited about this because I get to show some of the films that are some of my absolute favorites. And thematically, because Dr. Stover, are you a doctor? I can't remember. MFA.
Professor Stover is
Professor
fine.
Stover, yes. So you are often talked about being part of the Afrofuturists, or at least you talk about that and about that theory. And there's educational films, for the most part, are lily white. There's lots and lots of white children in these films. And at some point in the mid-'60s, they started showing up, and this was because of the civil rights movement, because it was becoming clear that educational films needed to show some diversity because they were shown to every kid. And so you started seeing kids, but initially they were in the background. Kids of color were in the background. Or when they showed up, it was them talking about some sort of diversity issue. And so I love these films because they feature Black kids as main characters, and they're just telling a story. And I love that. And each of these has a kid using their imagination, which was happening with white students and white kids for forever with educational films. But these are films that actually stand out because they actually have kids of color imagining. And we can talk more about that. This first film is animated, and it came out, I believe, in the early 80s, and it's based on a book. It's called The Telescope. Let's watch it.
there were one thing that Jonelle Jones liked to do more than anything else, it was to sit at her window and look up into the night sky at the stars and planets. Often late at night, when she was supposed to be asleep, Jonelle would sit and stare at the sky. Sometimes her mother or her father would catch her at it and insist she get back into bed. It was late, they would say. Far too late for a child to be up. But what better time was there to see the stars? Jonelle loved the way they seemed to shimmer and dance about. She even had names for some of them. Her favorites were Benjamin, Beatrice, and Fred. Of course, Harry, Larry, and May were nice too, as were Boris, Morris, and Rita. But they all seemed to be so very far away. If only they were a little closer, thought Jonelle, she could get to know them much better. The next day at school, her teacher, Miss Wattle, told the class all about the stars and planets. Of course, the stars all had names that were different from the ones Jonelle gave them, but that didn't matter. Miss Wattle told them all about people called astronomers and how they used telescopes. By looking through a telescope, she explained, the stars seemed to be much closer and clearer to the eye. The first thing Jonelle did upon arriving home that day was to make a telescope. It wasn't a real telescope, but Jonelle didn't know that. If an astronomer could bring the stars closer by looking through a metal tube, she could do just as well looking through a cardboard one. And it worked. The stars and the planets and even the moon came much closer than before. Jonelle was so excited that she forgot that she was supposed to be asleep and called her mother and her father. "Look, oh look," she said to them. "My telescope works." Her father looked and then smiled. "Indeed it does," he said. "But now I think it's time for you to put it away for tonight." Jonelle was far too excited to sleep. She had to try her telescope once more, just to make sure. She looked, and once again the stars, planets, and moon moved closer. It did work. It really worked. Why, she thought, if I had a bigger telescope, maybe the stars would come even closer. The next day, Jonelle found a larger cardboard tube, and that night it worked again. The stars, moon, and planets did come even closer. It was a magnificent sight. They nearly filled the sky. There was Benjamin and Beatrice and even Fred. They were all there. Jonelle let out such a whoop of delight that her mother heard her and came into the room. The stars, planets, and moon all moved back. "See them, Mama? See how close they are? You can almost touch them." Her mother looked through the new telescope. "I'm going to build an even bigger telescope than this one, Mama. Even bigger." But it was not easy to find a cardboard tube bigger than the one she had. Jonelle looked everywhere, in the storeroom, in the basement, and in all the closets. She asked some of the other people in the building, but no one had a large cardboard tube. What was she going to do? She had to have a bigger telescope if the stars were going to get close enough to touch. That night at dinner, Jonelle moped and picked at her food. Her father asked what was wrong, and Jonelle told him. He was certain he could find something down at the store that would do the job, but for now, the smaller telescope would just have to do. The next evening, he came home with a great cardboard tube of the type that cloth came rolled on. It was the last one at the store, so she would have to take care of it. Jonelle rushed into her room, opened the window, and looked through her grand new telescope. Oh, my! It was a sight she could hardly believe. The stars, moon, and planets had all moved right down next to the building, nearly touching it. Jonelle could reach right out and pat Benjamin on one of his points. Oh, what a marvelous thing her new telescope was. Of course, she would keep it forever, and each night bring her friends down right to her window no matter where she was. Night after night, sometimes even after her parents were asleep, Jonelle would look through her telescope and talk happily to her new friends. One day, Jonelle's cousin Morty came for a visit. The very first thing that Morty saw when he walked into Jonelle's room was a large cardboard tube leaning against the wall. He wanted to know what it was for, and Jonelle told him and asked if he would like to try it out. Morty looked at her, but then said, "Sure, why not?" "Now be careful with it," Jonelle cautioned. Morty looked through it for a moment, then said, this would make a better rocket than the telescope," and he shot it out the window. Jonelle was horrified. She rushed from the room and took the elevator down to the street. Maybe she could get to it before, but it was too late. A truck ran right over her wonderful telescope and smashed it flat. That night, Jonelle lay in bed. It was very late and she could not sleep. Her telescope was gone. Oh, she could go to the window and look at the stars the way she used to, but it wouldn't be the same. Without the telescope, they would not come close, would they? Jonelle began to wonder. Would they? There certainly wouldn't be any harm in finding out. Jonelle got out of bed, went to the window, and looked up into the night sky. The stars, moon, and planets all moved down next to the building, nearly touching it.
All right.
Well, hey,
So what do you think about that film, Professor Stover?
oh wow. Well, let's first start with the significant aspect of the truly inspiration it provides to children, especially Black children, relative to considering astronomy. The scientist in me is loving it, especially. The science communicator is loving it even more. So when we start to look at how this story is built around a young Black girl taking an interest in stars and planets, never mind the fact that they take an interest in her by the end, is phenomenally rich with all sorts of possibilities. So that's on the face value what is very significant in regards to it as an educational film.
Nice. So the date was actually 1977 when this came out. What grade were you in 1977?
Oh, do I really have to say? I was in college studying microbiology and American studies.
Excellent. Was there something that inspired you when you were young where you're like, I want to pursue science. I want to get into science?
Well, for me, my parents were already buying me microscopes and chemistry sets as I grew up. Elementary school. Of course, I was able to find affiliation with other nerds in junior high school. So that whole notion of even having a science club, actually, I was just querying one of my students whose last name is the same as an 8th grade science teacher I had in Prince George's County, Maryland, who, she really tore into us because we had the school science fair and we were prepping our projects to participate in the big Prince George's County Science Fair up on the college campus that I eventually went on to attend. And, we were joking around and playing. She said, look, y'all are not taking this seriously. Yet, I think that was just to nudge us a little bit more. Yeah, I came back with an honorable mention.
Nice. In
8th grade. The rest of that might even unfold as we discuss one of the other films. But certainly, that interest started to take hold, and I was always doing projects with microscopes. But it also, living in the Washington, D.C. area, there were those outlets to the museums and the places of science. In fact, in 8th grade with that particular teacher, every Thursday, there was a group of us who would be taken out to Goddard Space Flight Center.
Nice.
So this exposure to astronomy, to space science, was highly impactful on our minds and our interests. You know, there are two of those guys I'm still in touch with. One's a chemical engineer, and the other went into meteorology. So when I look at the impacts of these experiences of being exposed to science in an educational setting, but with these other additional experiences, it says a whole lot for what kind of difference it can make on a young child's interest career-wise. And this film shares some of that. At the same time, I mean, we look at the stories behind Mae Jemison and Star Trek to bring in a sort of Afrofuturist discussion. And this has all sorts of other layers of potential. Her getting into naming the stars, which is what scientists did and do, right? So yeah, it has a whole lot going for it in that regard.
Nice. All right, so this next film, I mentioned to Professor Stover that this was one of my favorite films, and I'm happy to show it. I like it because it deals with a little kid who's just kind of like filled with angst because he's a little kid, and how he aspires and how the teacher kind of brings out what he aspires towards. This is called Who Cares?
We're waiting breakfast on you. You're going to be late for school. Seconds or else. You're going to get it. You hear?
Walk me to school? Sure. You know Junior's waiting for me downstairs. Walk yourself. Oh, and take good care of my jacket. Might be wanting it back sometime. When's the nap was uncalled for? And it's his now. By the way, haven't you forgotten something? My math homework. Gee, thanks, Mom. You just saved my life. Winston?
Hi, Mom.
Be home early here.
I'm leaving now.
Oh, Carol, let me put your sleeves. And do me and yourself a favor today. Smile just a little bit, okay? Good. Oh, the baby.
Bye, Mom. Who cares anyway? Okay, kids, hand it over. Hand over that stick. Who's gonna make this? Me. Get him, Charles, get him. Who cares anyway? He can have the old broke up stick. He can have the whole school. You should have got him anyway.
Charles? Is that you, Charles Simmons? Young man, I think it's imperative that you finish your education.
Charles? Yes, you. Come on up. I can't accept this. Not when we both know you can do better.
Who cares?
I hope I didn't hear what I think I heard you say. Let's hope not. Class, this morning we must finish the tryouts for the leader of our band. Let's get down to business and see if we can't choose someone before lunchtime. Hurry up, class. Carol, will you be first?
Yes.
Ready, Carol? Okay, 1, 2, start. Ready, Charles?
1, 2, ready, play.
Who cares, Charles? You care. Lots of people care.
All right, Professor Stover.
Yes. Well, and that of course appeals to me because you had vinyl in that, and of course many of my students know I teach with vinyl. Of course, in these COVID-19 times, don't get to show off that vinyl as much, but I think it's interesting to note, the excitement that Charles brought to the table as a percussionist. And I couldn't help but thinking about us here in North Carolina, where we should embrace and take complete ownership of the fact that one major jazz drummer coming out of New Land, right out of Elizabeth City, Max Roach, who would have been situated in, I think what that were New York streets, is significant. And you notice, all the instruments that he's seeing in the store windows and everything. But a good question to ask is, who did some of that earlier soundtrack? Because there was a lot of jazz going on.
Right. Sometimes they credit them and sometimes they don't, which is unfortunate.
Yeah, because somebody was thinking appropriately so relative to making this a truly immersive experience relative to the soundscape and that was going on. I don't know if the marching band sounds were coming off of that album in that As You Are and AV Geek, you know how you cats in the school get to bring it and y'all get to bring the darn turntables in too the albums when you're helping the teachers.
Yes. This film, it resonates with me because, you as a kid, I was kind of aimless until the teacher helped me kind of find what I was interested in. Mm-hmm. And again, like the first film, it was a teacher that recognized this kid is interested in this and I should help them. I should help, give them support and make them examine what that interest is more further and more fully.
Yeah, I like the transition of his peers, who you laughed at him when he said, who cares? And then you had other kids, maybe not necessarily in his classroom, who both bullied him, among other things. You got the 3 girls laughing and all, and those are challenges to a young kid, so being able to find yourself in school is important. And certainly him finding himself definitely was facilitated by the teacher, allowing him to take on that role of their band. Can't necessarily say George Clinton or James Brown would be too pleased because I don't think all of them were on the one. But for the most part, it was one big happy classroom who truly enjoyed having him direct them at the end. So I enjoyed also seeing that closure that was given relative to his classmates accepting him as the drum leader.
Nice. So the next film we're going to watch was, it's part of a series called Inside Out. And it was, as it says in the film, sponsored by Exxon. But it was on public television and in the 70s. And it was made by different public television studios across, usually the Eastern Seaboard. And this one might have been in Virginia or Maryland. I'm not absolutely sure. It'll say in the credits. But what this did is it kind of talked about emotional aspects of being a kid. And it also didn't always give answers. Like, it would show a situation and then just kind of leave you as the student to kind of figure out, like, well, what am I supposed to do? You know, what's the next situation? And it's like a provocative to create kind of a discussion points. And so this film resonated with me, and Professor Stover, it supposedly resonated with you too, which is great. This is called...
Yeah, we'll toss that question out to everybody.
Yeah, I think that's a good question to ask. So this is called Someone Special.
Under the supervision of NIT, Instructional Television.
Slowly up and over. Let your head drop. That's it. All the way to the floor. And can everyone see David's position? 1, 9, 1, 2, very good. 4, 2, 1, 2, and 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2.
I used to think about the pretty clothes Miss Simpson wore, with all the pretty colors. She looked like pictures in magazines. There was one store where I used to look in the window and make believe she was there. I tried as hard as I could to show her how smart I was.
Come on, me, I'm right, me,
Let's see, that's right and that's right.
Did you still have problems to do?
Oh, we only have a few minutes left, David.
I can do less problems in a minute.
I'm sure you can. Oh, who wants to help me in the set?
Me.
Start down here. That's it. Okay. Well, I have to fold mine straight, too. Now, don't forget, as soon as you finish one, then you take your two colors and you
Come on, guys! David!
Have you finished with the glue? Oh, well, here, let's
So
use
we're
it.
gonna put this on here?
Yeah, that'll be pretty nice.
Stick 'em up. Oh, right there.
Oh, my hero. Hey, wake up, David. Thank you. Tell us about him, David, will you?
His name is Tom. Hi, Tom. And he comes from India. He likes
I took Tom, my pet parrot, to school just to show her.
He lived to be about 30 or 40 years old and 6 months old.
Look at the colors in that bird. Aren't they beautiful? What colors do you see?
Green, orange, and yellow, and red.
Look at his eyes.
Miss Simpson,
Yes, David.
may I keep time on your desk so the case won't get knocked over?
Sure, you certainly may.
All day I kept hanging around her desk, acting like I wanted to look after Tom.
I was born in February. That's all you get out of me, okay?
What day?
The 18th.
What day?
Well, let's see. I think I was born on a Monday. Why? What day were you born on?
It's a secret.
Okay, well, then we'll have secrets together.
Be careful now. Where do you live?
A couple blocks away, David.
What street?
I knew she lived with her mother and father, but I didn't know where.
What street do you live on? What street do you live on, David? Watch it, girls. What street do you live on?
I live on Madison.
Madison. 5, 5, 5, 6, 7, 7, 6. Hello?
Every weekend I ride my bike past her house. I kept hoping she might come out, and I was scared she might come out. Just in case she did come out, I always acted like I just happened to be going by. One time I got my nerve up, and I figured out a way I could go knock on her door.
Hi there.
Hi, would you like to buy a raffle ticket?
A raffle ticket for what?
PTA,
And what are they raffling?
cameras, TVs, things like that.
Well, don't be nervous. I'd like to have one. How much are they?
What a piece.
Well, now, just relax.
Now, just relax. Lift your head up, straight up, relaxing. Now, open your eyes. Open your eyes. Everyone's eyes should be wide open. Fine. Okay, now I'm going into a review.
I dreamed that Miss Simpson fell in love with me, and I thought if I just dreamed hard enough, I could make it come true.
All the way.
I used to look at her real hard, and it was like I could take her picture in my head. I kept it a secret how I felt, but I had to tell somebody, so I talked a little bit to my best friend, Chris.
You know who's really pretty? Who? Miss Simpson. Man, you call Miss Simpson. David called Miss Simpson. I didn't say that. I just said she was pretty. Good thinking, man. Miss Simpson's gonna get married by the man that picks her up after school.
I acted like I didn't care, but I watched her after school to see if it was true. It was true. I made up my mind I was going to work harder and do even better in everything. I tried to look real good all the time.
David, are you about finished in here?
I haven't finished brushing my teeth and I haven't combed my hair yet.
You're looking good, son, but your dad has to go to work, so he has to get in here.
Okay.
I made believe her boyfriend got fired from his job and started robbing people. And one day he tried to rob her, and I gave him a kick and he ran off.
Come on. Let's go ahead and get my handkerchief.
All right, hurry up. Come on, let's get these lines straight or we aren't going anywhere. Are we ready? All right, come on, let's go.
I got it in my head that I could still get Miss Simpson to fall in love with me if I gave her some presents. I left my best rock on the desk, but I didn't say it was from me.
Yes, David.
I'm finished.
All right, fine. For those of you who have finished, place your pencils on your desk, hold your hands, sit back in your chairs and relax.
Dearly beloved, we are met together in the presence of God to join this man and this woman in marriage.
I have a problem.
Okay, let's see that.
I give this
642.
ring
I give this ring
as a pledge
as a pledge
of our union.
of our union.
I now pronounce you man and wife together. Now you may salute the bride.
David? David? Are you with us today? Collect the papers in your row, will you please?
Chris, my friend, started telling everybody I like Miss Simpson, and a bunch of girls started to tease me.
David, if you'll erase the blackboard for me, that'll be fine.
I didn't care about being teased, but I had to find out if Miss Simpson really liked me.
Miss Simpson?
Yes, David. What is it, David?
Do you like me more than anybody in class?
No.
She said she liked everybody, but the way she said no and looked at me made me feel stupid about all the things I've been thinking.
Take you to the movie, Cinderella. Huh? Did it hear some fun? No, she likes it. Huh? Did it? Stop it! Stop it! Stop it! Stop it! Stop it! David! David! Stop it! Right that minute! What is it? He hit me first, David.
David!
I figured out a way to make everybody laugh at her, but the janitor erased it.
That's right. All right, now lift your left hand, tuck your thumb under the bar, and wrap
I
your
stopped
fingers
being good and
around
started
the
causing
hand.
trouble to get back
All
at
right,
her.
now let's create it again for your audience. All right, class, can you tell what we're holding on to?
Yes.
Good. All right, now.
Do that.
David, what has gotten into you?
I did more and more bad things, but she wouldn't pay any attention to me. So I made up my mind to really fix her and carve "I hate you" in her desk. I acted like I forgot my lunchbox so I could go back after school.
David, what are you doing with those scissors? You haven't said one word, David. Suppose the two of us talk, just a man-to-man talk between the two of us. What about the two of you? Miss Simpson, how do you feel about a talk between the two of you?
Hey, look at me. I'll understand. You can tell me. Oh, come on.
Well, I brought out the presents and things, and I tried to act nice, and then you said you didn't like me.
Oh, I didn't mean that, David. I do like you. I like the other kids, too. You're very special to me. You know that, don't you?
Yes.
The principal told me to smooth down the desk. Miss Simpson got married. We were friends. And later she moved.
Inside Out is a series of programs and related materials developed and supported by 32 educational agencies in the United States and Canada, with additional support from Exxon Corporation. This program was produced by KETC, St. Louis, Missouri, under the supervision of NIT, National Instructional Television.
So, Professor Stover,
Mhm.
is this the time that we own up?
Oh, hey, it stands to bear that all of us have had a crush on a teacher. You know, my crush, or first crush, was in third grade. I was growing up in Washington, D.C., at what was Charles Young Elementary School, named after what was the third major military general in the force. And Charles Young was an important figure. We had a big portrait in the school. But third grade, Miss, well, I'm not going to mention her last name, but she was quite stylish, just like the teacher that we had here. She related very well with all of us. And I always thought that she related to me in a special way. So yeah, she was special in that regard. And yeah, that was my first crush.
Dara, I don't know where your audio went. Your audio just disappeared.
Oh, hold up.
There we go.
Is it back?
Yeah.
So yeah, high school crush.
Yeah.
Microbiology teacher in high school.
Oh, interesting. Microbiology teacher in...
Yeah, which that's why I went off to study microbiology in college. But I was already interested in the sciences, but this really narrowed it down for me, and got to serve as her teacher's assistant as well. So yeah, that was important. And yeah, we're talking about, you know, in the 70s. One of the important things visually about this film, his high water bell bottoms, striped ones, much akin to the self same ones that the Jackson 5 wore at one time. Yeah, I wore some of those too, with an afro. But that relationship was significant, and I thought it was interesting how it played to again, imagination, and more importantly, this relationship. But he took that imagination even further, with dreaming about rescuing her, dreaming about getting married to her. Oh man, my man's imagination was running.
And that's the thing is, I think that most kids have that. It's in their heads, and to see it actually kind of played out in a film is really great. So, you know, you go by SciPoet.
Mm-hmm.
Tell us about what you do when you do your poetry performances. Like, tell us more about that.
Yeah. Well, you know, I was able to include a couple of poems in my thesis, master's thesis, that were science poetry. In fact, in them weighing judgment, you know, the note initially on it was, I can weigh judgment on this science communication and writing, but the science poetry, I'm gonna have to defer to someone else in the department. And And shortly after graduating from Johns Hopkins University and moving here to North Carolina, I decided, wow, science poetry, science poet. So I decided, yeah, I'm going to put that on my license plate.
Nice.
So I've had that on my license plate, on my North Carolina tag here in North Carolina ever since I moved here. But within the context of writing poetry previous to moving here, as well as after moving here, that celebrates scientists in some way, shape, and form. In fact, one of those greatest hits, I guess you could say, actually, is a poem I wrote before moving here that's called Mad Baby, but it actually celebrates a North Carolina State University scientist, Joanne Burkholder, who is an aquatic botanist who studies harmful algae and discovered a new toxic algae called Listeria, which was a rage and a challenge back in the late 80s, early 90s, relative to its connection to fish kills. So that poem celebrates her, environmental science, directed at kids. It's been recorded with music and everything. So yeah, so that's one clear example of the sorts of science that I do. That actually I did a whole presentation back earlier this year. Was able to squeeze it in before our COVID-19 transition relative to the Tuesday noon colloquia that the Genetic Engineering and Society Center puts on. Mm-hmm. And so they asked me to give a presentation. So I did it on science poetry and shared several other examples. There's a major collection of poems written by Marilyn Nelson, who's the poet laureate of Connecticut, who did a whole collection of poems on George Washington Carver, who was a chemist, a botanist. Yeah, everybody talks about him in The Peanut, but he was truly an amazing scientist. So I opened with that, but one of the other key features of that was leading up to a poem, Two Ritas, which looks at Rita Dove, the poet laureate of the United States in the early 90s, and Rita Colwell, one of my mentors and former professors in microbiology at the University of Maryland, College Park. You had these two women, one black, one white, who were at the pinnacle of their fields, one in the arts and one in the sciences. And so what was the universe saying to us with that happening simultaneously? Well, that poem, The Two Ritas, examines that. So yeah, there are all sorts of ways and means that I engage science and its examination and celebration through poetry. I even give that as an outlet for my students in my introduction to science, technology, and society relative to the weekly reading assignments that they have.
So we have a lot of non-students who are kind of tuning in on this. Do you have any recommendations, recommended readings, or things that people can watch that you say like, oh, this is a really great thing that deals with what your interests are, and maybe even deals with the Africa futurism?
Well, there's several lectures online. I mean, I hate saying this, but yeah, you Google my name and no telling what comes up. But I'm willing to wager that if you Google SciPoet, you're probably, and the two Ritas, you're going to probably get that presentation that I did for Genetic Engineering and Society Center. Especially if you go to their website, you might have to search further through it, but they've archived all of their Tuesday colloquia that have been going on for many years now. And of course, this was just recently this year, back in February. Certainly there are other presentations. Certainly there was a presentation I gave at the Museum of Natural Science, North Carolina Museum of Natural Sciences, on environmental science and the Black Panther, which is an interesting one because I use it to also examine who are the environmental scientists out there of African descent, both on this and the other side of that creek called the Atlantic Ocean. And so that's a whole nother interesting immersion in what I examine and what I do. With Afrofuturism, that environmental science piece ties into that because of the tie-in with the Black Panther. I'm putting together with a colleague on the West Coast a whole discussion series that'll happen over 3 months, October, November, December. And that first one will be in October 11th, 2:00. Stay tuned.
Nice. Well, thank you so much for joining us and watching these films and talking about them. It's like I said, I've been wanting to show these films for a while, and I'm happy that they resonated in some way with you.
Well, no, you selected some really good ones out of what I hear, the hundreds and hundreds of films that you have available to you.
Tens of thousands,
theme
actually.
That you chose. Say that again?
Tens of thousands, actually.
Well, see, oh man, I'm way off the mark, huh? But yeah, this whole selection of the theme you chose, this the imagination of a Black kid, was very well represented in the films that were shared today. And I think when we look at when those films were being shown versus who knows, I can't vouch for what's being shown to our kids these days and times, but
who knows?
Of course they'll have to be shown through this mechanism now primarily. But are there still films even being produced in the manner that they were back in those ages?
Right.
It's a hard bet to say that in many regards they aren't. Not in the thousands upon thousands, not the Carl Sagan billions upon billions.
Billions and billions.
Right. Now there might be 10 to 20, but who knows what sort of films or audio visuals teachers are using now.
So we didn't need to do it, but everybody named who they had a crush on, what teachers they had a crush on in the comments.
I wish I could have heard some of those responses.
We got Ms. Barnes, we got Ms. Roth, we got who else? There was a couple of other people. The people were kind of proud to talk about it. So it definitely did resonate.
That's good.
Miss
As long
Ward,
as nobody names any of my teachers.
Yeah, I get it. I get it. Oh, and so Marion actually had a question, and then we'll let Jason talk. But
okay.
She said, so Skip and Professor Stover, you often talk about why these films were made in the audiences. So why do you think this film was made and the purpose? And I'm guessing that she's talking about someone special. Like why was that film made?
Well, I mean, the film's important because it's dealing with the notions. There's several things here that you could examine with this film, but one of them is when you start to look at his behavior changed because he felt that he wasn't loved or liked by his teacher. And so when you start to get to the heart of the matter with even the challenges that some students might express with changed behavior and more disruptive and the sort of thing, it could be as simple a matter as that. And, going to the principal's office, which way back then, you go to the principal's office, you get a paddling. But here you see no paddling. You see there was a discussion that got to the bottom, to the root of the problem. And so I think it's interesting to note that film gives a whole nother insight into how misunderstanding can be connected to changed behavior of the nature that David shared, that was easily corrected in some way, shape, and form, I imagine, through that discussion that they had and her communicating to him. Yeah, no,
And what's interesting is somebody realized in the comments, they said, oh, this is like, it's an adult narrator. who's looking back.
Mm-hmm.
So the idea is like he survived it. And we're assuming that he is now living a successful life and all that, but it's
that narration is important because actually going back to the first film, the animated one, the narrator sounded like Morgan Freeman.
Yeah.
But it turns out, no, a guy by the name of Christopher Brooks is, at least as the credits roll. But yeah, the narration does set or put an age to who the storyteller is. And yeah, this looking back aspect of the story says a whole lot about perspective in regards to the film.
Nice. All right, Jason, you want to play us out?
Yeah, I do. So, Professor Stover, thank you so much for joining us tonight.
Yeah, this was really cool. I mean, these 3 days, and I'm in the middle of a third day of 3 days of online engagement. Believe it or not, tomorrow it's in the morning with a discussion of from Batman to Black Lives Matter. So I thank you for this because this was really a wonderful experience, both seeing the films, but more importantly, discussing them.
Well, we really appreciate it. And maybe we can convince you to come and do it with us again sometime.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure.
Keep your email open, or don't. You can decide off camera if you want to.
Okay.
Thank you so much, Professor Stover. And thank you, Skip. Remember, everybody, to visit avgeeks.com for more info about AV Geeks if you're interested in the 36,000 films, what Skip and the team over there does. And you can remember, if you are an NC State person, you can check out DVD compilations from the library. Reserve them online. Come pick them up. Wear your mask. If you want to explore more from Black artists and authors, I would like to tell you that you can also join us at 2 upcoming book discussions led by graduate students at NC State. One discussion on In West Bend, a beautiful first novel about a Black community in North Carolina, and one on Kindred, Octavia Butler's classic sci-fi historical novel. And you can pre-register for both. You can do that at our library events page, lib.ncsu.edu/events, or just search events at the homepage, or watch this rerun and look for a cool title that we can put along the bottom. Our next show is on Friday, October 9th at 6, and it's called The Germs You Spread. And it's going to be all about the transmission of diseases and a discussion of what we've learned in the years since we made the movies that we'll watch. So tune in, and until then, we hope you have a great couple of weeks, and we'd love to see you soon. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, everybody. Bye.